cool thing is, and this is where I want to start getting into traits a bit, is that there's one trait in particular that is like really, really busted in my opinion, and bleeds into every single part of the game, and is just present in the early game really hard too, like very, very prominently as well, which is Warden. So Warden, I don't know how much you played around Warden units. It is possibly the most broken trait they've ever printed in like the history of TFT, because at the two piece, your units just get 27% damage reduction for 10 seconds. And then after that, it's 15%, which that's a like if you look at Steadfast Heart, right? Let me see if I can snag Steadfast here. Where is it? I'm blind. It's somewhere here. I should go from chain and then go from there. Quick look. Okay, here it is. So Steadfast Heart says, take 8% less damage while above 50% health. Take 15% less damage instead. Sorry, well, 50% health, take 15% less damage instead. And so that's maybe one of the best items in the game, right? Historically, in set 10 as well, this was considered like even a premier friendly item, even though it should be like a third item you build. People, if they could get away with building it first, they'd be like, oh my God, yes, because it's just such a good item. And, you know, all it does is give you 2 Warden with, obviously it has some stats on it as well, right? The HP and the armor being the big ones, but all it does is give you 2 Warden without the bonus 12% on the 2 piece. So that is to say that damage reduction is like, flat damage reduction is absolutely disgusting. It is just the most obscene, absurd stat in TFT. And this trait just gives you a buttload of it for free. And so what that means is a couple things. One, and we talked a little bit about that front to back win condition for a board, because that's purely in the beginning parts of a set when people are unfamiliar with unit quality. You and me both included in that, right? No one at this point in TFT and set 11's lifespan will have played enough to know how strong every unit is. And that's fine. And so what we can do though is we can just say like, okay, we want to play front to back. And so we already said there's a lot of good ways to play front to back early. But beyond that, itemization wise, that means that it becomes really easy to itemize these things, because all you need on these units, because it's just flat damage reduction, right? So a synergy maybe like Vanguard or something, right? That gives you there's something that gives you armor and MR. The Behemoth, I guess, gives you armor and MR this set, right? Something like that. You get a lot of diminishing returns for building something like a Gargoyles or like a Bramble or a Declaw even, right? Because stats don't like more stats, generally speaking. And, there's a lot of things that give armor and MR and everything. And so stuff like Behemoth, even if it's like Bruiser, like you want to slam a Warmogs really badly, but because Warmogs is a great early game item. But if you slam Warmogs on a Bruiser, it's not bad. Obviously, Bruisers, Bruisers both love Warmogs because obviously it goes well with both the percent bonus HP and this stuff. But then like they want, like the Behemoths want it a lot, but then like Bruisers also just want some armor and MR, so it gets a little awkward. It can be kind of hard to get like a really effectively itemized unit to make a big frontline. Where with these Wardens, you can literally slam anything. I've literally played Protector's Vow, Cute Cone, like QSS or something on my Mumu 2, and just is unkillable like the entire early mid game, because they just use basically the thing is that it lets you slam any defensive item you want to make that frontline, right? So the big ticket item being Gargoyles. If you slam Gargoyles on particularly like an Alawi or an Amumu, and I don't know how you are with how the meta has been progressing, but Alawi was like the most broken unit in the game a couple days ago, and then they nerfed her. She's still insane. Mumu is insane. They just buffed Mumu today. In fact, more so, I mean, the units are very good, obviously. They both just, this one shields, this one heals. And this one heals a little bit as well. But like they're basically just like self-sustaining, amping tanks that like being surrounded a little bit. This one maybe less so. This guy loves being surrounded. And they give themselves a lot of HP back and a lot of shielding and a lot of healing and all that good stuff. And then Amumu, I'll talk about Amumu, I guess, more in a second, because I need to give you the whole spiel on Wardens. They're so broken. But what it means is that because there's not only a lot of unit quality in Warden, and Nar maybe being the outlier, he kind of sucks, but that's fine. All these 3 Wardens, they all give themselves some stats. Jax gives himself armor and MR naturally, so like Warmogs may be a little bit better on Jax than a Gargoyle, but it's still fine. But like so you can build Gargoyles, you can build Sectors, you can build Bramble. You can even go Steadfast if you want. I wouldn't recommend it, but the cool thing about that is that Steadfast is historically, again, like the best tank item in the game. because no tank synergy just gives you flat damage reduction. This synergy just gives you the flat damage reduction, and the reason why it's kind of hard, why you don't see Steadfast slammed every game in set 10, right? Why you don't see it slammed on stage 2 every game is because Quick Love is valuable, and Chain is valuable, generally speaking, right? And so it's the best item in the game for tanks, but it's also really hard to play item economy wise because like how are you gonna afford a Quick Love going to your front line? But then you go like gargoyles and you're like, man, I'm gonna fall off later, or like it's not scaling quite well enough. But again, now these units, they don't want Steadfast Heart. They never need Steadfast Heart to get really tanky. They have 2, 4, 6 Wardens, so you can go whatever tank items you want on this thing. You can just slam whenever you want. Get rid of all. You can go Crown Guard. You can go. I played the Crown Guard augment with like gargoyles and like cute cone on my Alawi today. Alawi 1 didn't die till I think 4-1 or 4-2. Because again, you can just it frees you up not only to get a lot of extra value from these items that are more easily slammed, but it lets you slam them and expect to get a lot of value. It lets you slam stuff like gargoyles, stuff like I think protectors is something that hasn't been slammed a lot in recent times, right? Because maybe if you think you're gonna play on like a Thresh or like maybe Nautilus this set, right? These big CC guys, Thresh being last set's Thresh, not this set's Thresh per se. Then maybe you want that for the extra mana because like the shielding isn't the shielding and the armor and the MR and stuff. It's like kind of hard to play around that, and it's like I don't know. It's like the big thing is that like you'd always build Steadfast, but then you always want Steadfast, but then like this procs below Steadfast, so it just feels really weird. But again, the beautiful thing with this is that you can just build that. You can just build Bramble. You can just build Declaw, and you can go Titans allow you. Fuck it, why not? I might as well. It gives you stats. Basically, Wardens scale so multiplicatively with all the easy to get stats in the game. If you get like Wardens with what's it called? The thing that gives you armor and MR in rows. I keep forgetting. I don't forget what it's called. It's when you have like 3 in a row, you get armor and MR.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, though.
Yeah.
If you get it with that, for example, right? Like it's just how does anything die? It just doesn't die. Nothing dies. So that is my quick TED talk on why Warden is the most broken trait in the game. As far as like stats go, as far as item economy goes, but beyond that, this is going to break into the trait web, and I think this is why Warden is such a good jumping point, or such a good way to start looking at the set. Is that the trait web makes Warden even more broke because there's all these kind of little positive things you can play, right? And I think as far as flex play right now goes, I think Alawi is probably the most valuable unit in the game because a lot of building boards this set, I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of the synergies of the set are not very selfish, which is kind of the big difference from I think last set. And that last set 8-bit is a selfish synergy. 8-bit units get better. 5 units get not that much better. Rapid fire could be like it could be not selfish. 10% attack speed for the team is not bad, but it's not insane. But comparison like that, now we have Heavenly, which gives your whole team a bunch of stats, and the Heavenly units don't even do anything special for themselves. They just want to be rerolled to give them more stats. We have Arcanist, who gives 20 AP on the 2-piece, which instead of giving the Arcanist themselves any more value, they just like instead of being like rapid fire, where let's say Arcanist get a little bit extra value on the 2-piece, but then like the whole team gets something. All that power is just in the team of the 2-piece. Obviously, in the 4-piece, Arcanist gets a little bit stronger, and that's fine if you want to go that way, but that's to say that like 2 Arcanists is a great splash. Heavenly, a great splash. And there's more as well, right? Ink Shadow, the item can go on anyone. The Ink Shadow units get a little bit of value in the damage and damage reduction and damage category, but they still get a ton of value. Ghostly units, and then they get a little bit of they get a little bit of selfish value in terms of the healing that they get from the ghost being on someone, but the WoW doesn't care about the damage amp, but the thing in the backline that's not a ghost unit does care about the damage amp, so it's not a very selfish trait. Storyweaver, same deal, right? It's just like Kale buffing things to either side, or you're making like a win condition around Kale being your carry, and then you just get to build a bunch of friendly items. So that's to say that there are a lot, and this is probably why the trait would feel so different in this set compared to last set, is that there are a lot of very not selfish traits, which again does also open up to being a very flexible set in general as well. And so that's to say that Alawi is like the queen pin, the king pin, and a little bit of both of the whole flex thing, right? Because her synergies are insane. 1, 2 Arcanists, again, like the best synergy in the game in terms of like just like randomly teching it in because 20 AP for a whole team is nasty and the unit quality is insane. Warden, I mean, we talked about Warden as a synergy. It is disgustingly good. Ghostly, 2 Ghostly is great. It connects, and this is the cool thing, is that Arcanist and Ghostly both connect to a lot of units that kind of open up the game, right? So Arcanist can connect to more selfish things. Maybe you play a more selfish one, maybe being Lux, where Porcelain is a very selfish synergy, right? It just gives a lot of value to Porcelain unit. And then you just play a Moo, right? And then you get into Arcanist, and maybe your Arcanist, and this is, or you get into like 4 Arcanists, and which means you play Nico, and maybe you play like Zoe. But then the cool thing about that is that all of a sudden maybe you can play Storyweaver, which is a team-wide trait, or you can play Heavenly, which is a team-wide trait. And there's all these kinds of extensions, right? But they all kind of start at these like really big team-wide buffs. And so I guess the first thing to do when approaching looking at the set trait with this set is to first look at the like really big team-wide effects, find where the unit value, where the quality of units are within those, and then start building out from there. And again, Alawi is like, holy shit. She has Ghostly, which is one of the best team-wide things. She has Arcus, which is the best team-wide things. And she has Warden, which is the best. I mean, it's obviously, it can be a team-wide thing with an augment, actually, but it's just like the best selfish synergy you've ever seen in the and that's what I mean. Sure, I think Dragon in set 1 might give that for its money, but at least in recent memory, the best trait that's been printed for just like single unit value. But then the cool thing, right, is that so then you look for extensions, and the crazy thing about Warden is that all the Wardens have insane extensions, like absolutely insane extensions, right? Garen gets you into, we can even like start making little pumps here, right? And this is maybe where you start looking at this web as a little bit more of like pods of units that you connect. So Garen, he's into stuff like Zoe. It can be like you can very easily get trick shot in, right? If you just play like Garen, Zoe, Alawi, plus Sivir, who by the way is a great unit because she also gives a buff. She's basically like a team-wide trait, but in a unit, because she just gives a buff to adjacent units. So you just put a Sivir in front of your Kale. Like if I have Kale here, where this or if this Nico is Kale, can I actually find a Kale? We'll just say this target dummy's Kale. If I put a Sivir here, let me find.
I think if you put in Sivir, it should pop in Kale too.
Oh, will it? Put in Sivir. I could not tell that was her at all. Oh my god. I think her splash fire looks nothing like Sivir. Then you put Sivir here, and it'll buff both Kale and Lux when she casts.
Oh, right.
Which is weird because Kale's actually
from a previous set, right?
Yeah, exactly. Kale actually doesn't do that for some reason. So Kale's buffs are row, but Sivir's buff is just adjacent, which is really awkward. But because they're either like you always play them together, obviously, right? You're playing Sivir, you're playing Kale, so it like really easy to fall in the trap of not being sure whether or not this affects this, but it does. So you can this unit can get a ton of value. And then like if you have Sivir, all of a sudden you can extend into maybe you're rerolling Teemo, or maybe you're playing around Bard, and so you're playing around Mythic, or you're playing around, and we're gonna get into why this is so crazy in a second. I'll just take these off, right? Take that off, but so maybe you're playing around Bard or Teemo, right? For sharpshooter stuff, you're rerolling Bard or something, or maybe you're playing around Kaisa to extend off trick shot. And I don't know if you noticed this, but Kaisa, there is an Ink Shadow Warden. Bard, there is a Mythic Warden. Let's say, oh, well, maybe I'm going to play like Syndra instead. I mean, Syndra's cool. Okay, Syndra, there is a Faded Warden. So there's like, just Warden extends and everything. And you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to play this Storyweaver stuff, right? Let's instead just try to extend off of Jax. So Jax, right? What can Jax lead into? Ink Shadow units, if you think about carries, generally you're thinking about, you're probably thinking about Kaisa or some kind of like backline AD thing, right? Because you're building items on like a sniper and you're playing around Senna plus something, plus like maybe you're playing around Senna plus Kate, which by the way, Ghostly Warden, 2 Ghostly snipers. And then let's say, okay, well, you want to get into Ash here. You know what? There's a Porcelain Warden. Whoa, Warden's there again. And basically you could just do that forever. You can do that with anything, right? Even if you're going like, let's say you're like, okay, well, I want to play Xayah plus Kaisa, right? Let's say you're doing that. Pog. You're like, okay, well, can I sell my Alawi? I don't know if I can sell my Alawi. So she is Dragon Lord's Lover's Trick Shot, right? And you know what what's a really good synergy for the team is Ghostly. She's half a Ghostly. And so you start doing something like this, where you play Morg and you play Diana, and all of a sudden, you're a Ghostly Sage. Whoa. And then the Warden can be whatever you want, right? The Warden at that point can be set because you're trying to cap out really high. It can be something like Orin because, or not Orin rather, because something like this because you just want to beef it up. Or let's say you're playing this because you rerolled Bard and then you got onto this stuff, or like maybe you're not playing Kaisa, right? You're playing like you want to play around Nautilus because you just have Nautilus too, so you just tech in that, and maybe you dual carry a Lilia. Maybe you play around 2 Bruiser with TK. So there's all these kinds of extensions, right? And so if I were to, we'll go through some more in a second too, but I think the way to crystallize this a little bit is to say that generally when you're team building, when you're building flexible boards this set, you should be thinking about branching off of some kind of team-wide trait, I would say. And it can depend, what team-wide traits you want to branch off of, obviously, it can be dependent on what exactly it is you have. If you have a York, maybe you branch, it's going to be, I haven't explored all these as fully explored Warden yet, which is, TB, taking it a bit easy as well. So eventually, I'll get there and you will as well. But, so you just started branching off of whatever you have and try to play around like the team-wide stuff first. And then you make sure that you land on something that also has a lot of selfish value for this one thing, right? Where like, I think a really good example of this is the Sivir board that I was talking about. Like just like using Sivir as an extension, because this set of units has such a great way of putting, what was the last unit I had here? Zoe, right? This set of units has such a great way to pump value into something that wants to be selfish, right? So one, it pumps a lot of value into a Lowy, because you have 2 Warden, and it's the most broken trait in the game, and you can just itemize the Lowy very easily. So you're pumping items into Lowy, you're pumping 2 Warden into a Lowy. Maybe you get to 4 Warden. It's very reasonable to do that. 4 Warden is, we'll talk about 4 Warden a little more as well, but it's like easiest trait in the world to play. It kind of reminds me of, if you remember the RE meta in set 10, where people would just play a bunch of, what were they called? Vanguard? I already forgot what they were called.
Sentinels.
Sentinels, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Like Sentinel RE stuff. You just like stick random Sentinels on the board because the trait was so good. It's basically that. I'm sure it'll get nerfed at some point, by the way, but no one needs to know quite yet. So it's kind of like that. Where like you can just play for, if you don't want to go fast 9, you can just play for Warden for a bit, and your board's probably fine. Especially if you like knew you're going to play on 4 Warden early and you started building ramp items like Rage Blade or Arcane or something just to play into a long fight because you knew it was going to happen. But because stuff like this, right? So if you were to play, let's say you want to tech in a carry here, you can easily put, let's say Diana's not here and this is not here. So this is like a core, right? And you can fill in stuff like this really, like you can fill in stuff here like crazy. And also this can be a different unit depending on, if you just have a different early game, you have a different early game. This is just an example. But let's say you're playing around this, this is your carry, right? Let's say it's a Syndra in the situation. All of a sudden you're like, okay, well, I'm going to tech in 4 Arcanist that's not an Arcanist. I thought that was Nico. You're like 4 Arcanist. And so what you do is you just put Sivir here, Kale here, and all of a sudden your Syndra has 4 Arcanists, which is, a little bit selfish. And then it has the Kale value, it has Sivir value, and then you can play it around whatever you want, right? And so like it's a way to pump a lot of value into this singular thing. Faded as well, like vertical faded is something I haven't played around with a lot, but it's something that is kind of indicative of that, like, 5 faded is very much a team-wide thing. There's a little bit of selfish value when the unit's paired because they get bonus HP as well, where the other units don't. And so you can play around that a bit. But let's say you want to get faded in. Maybe instead of this, you're playing around RE plus. What even are the faded units? Maybe you hit set. Beast mode.
Yeah,
set 4 Warden. There you go. That's a board. Right. So it's like, and then you're getting so much extra value because these things exist and because there's like so much selfish value being pumped into your carry. And so basically, at the end of the day, you just want to find as many ways as you can to get good team-wide effects, good synergy bots kind of going, but also a way to pump that value into a singular thing when possible. Exalted is a really great example of this as well. Exalted is like the coolest trade of all time. And let's just play like a bunch of random like I played a game yesterday where I think I re-rolled. I had Exalted. I don't know where they were, but I think I re-rolled Zoe, Alune, and then I played like a Kaisa on the board. And I just played this because like I think it was Kaisa, Alune, and something for my my Exalted units. And so I just played this Storyweaver core with Zoe and Alune dual carry. I just played like Umbral on 8 with 2 Warden and Lowy and whatnot. It was insane because Exalted team-wide value, a lot of like, the Kale pumping into my carry, Sivir pumping into my carry. It made it really good. And so that is to say that there's a lot of little flex pieces you can play around. There's like I think it's not even as like, as pod based as it has been in the past. I think if you think of like set 7 and 8, I think a lot of those sets had, maybe not pod stuff to the degree of like, I don't even know how to put that. The thing with set 7 and 8, I guess it was a little bit more like you just play this comp. Is that 9? I'm not mentioning set 9 because that 9.5 at least in particular was like you just play this comp, right? You play Demacia, you're playing every Demacia, and whatever. But the TFT in the past has been such that we're like, these couple units go together, these couple units go together, and you mash them together and like one big student, right? They're building blocks, and you move them around. And so this set is like that, but it's like that on steroids. And that like there's so many little things you can adjust, so many little pieces you can move around that it's a very similar thing with like you have building blocks, but there's just a lot of room to mess around with it and a lot of room to just like find an edge with it. So let's say Warden's broken. I would definitely suggest using, at least when you want to think about this, using Warden as a starting point to kind of get an idea of like what that looks like in terms of finding selfish traits that can be very good for their carry, but that also as you play around these less selfish traits like two Arcanist, Heavenly stuff, Ghostly, right? And it's just these synergies these synergies that like are very easy to play and give you a lot of value.
Okay, that's an amazing I don't know, thesis or whatever you want to call it.
It clicked yesterday because I played a Mumu 1 with double Gargoyles Cube Cone and it didn't die. It didn't die literally like the entire through stage 4. My Mumu 1 literally lived through stage 4 without dying a single time. And I was like, okay, this is it's starting to click. And so I think that's just a good starting point for this. I think it's a jumping off point for thinking about stuff in the set.
So given all of that, it seems like any time you have a Warden in the Exalted trait, like you basically are trying to force Exalted.
You should try to if you can. You should try to play around it if you can. As long as you're not like, I wouldn't say hard force it. Like definitely, if the game pushes you towards that a little bit, like definitely gear yourself towards it. Right. Try to put yourself on the right track for it. But yeah, if you have Warden and Exalted, oh my god, the game is just getting because it connects to everything, right? It connects to literally everything in the game. So like you can't not play Warden. If you can't not play Exalted, or rather, it's the same chances of you not being able to like easily fit Exalted into your board when one is a Warden is like astronomically low. Like it would have to be like Garen, Silas. I don't even know. Garen, I don't even know. I don't even know what it'd have to be because you could definitely fit Silas in there very, very easily. So yeah.
So my take on the Exalted trait right now, after the nerf from 2 gold to 1 gold, is it seems like a lot of times you're not really going for the econ early unless you're like loose streaking because it seems like they intentionally set it up so that most of the early game traits don't really fit well together.
Yeah.
I think there are probably some rare exceptions to that, but it seems like Exalted is primarily to like maybe cap out your board. Ideally, you could, if there's some like 2 or 3 costs that fit well together, then maybe you could fit it at level 6 or 7. But usually you're looking to, if the situation arises that it happens to fit in, like probably fit it in closer to level 8 and then use it to like kind of cap out at 9, 10. And rarely, it seems like rarely do you trying to get 5 Exalted in unless you're already like getting very 9 or 10, or you have like
a bunch of 4 and 5 costs in the Exalted pool as maybe one of the situations.
Yeah. And you have what you would call it, the double spatula. Fawn. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a rare thing to want to tech in. I will say that there are just certainly spots where you can reroll with Exalted. I think Exalted is kind of like the poster boy of what we've talked about for a long time now, in making boards based on how they function, not based on how the synergies look, or based on like how a fight would actually play out, right? And then like building a fight. For example, like I look back to that Zoe Elune board I made, where like there's no reason those units should really be together besides Exalted, but I had 3 items on Zoe and 3 items on Elune, and they just worked really well together because Elune was hitting backline, Zoe was hitting backline, Elune was buffing my Zoe. The synergies worked out well just because Warden exists. But that is to say, I was certainly missing some key synergies, right? I was only 2 Umbral, I was only 3 Story Weaver. I couldn't go vertical into anything. It was a very wide board, but because the unit quality was there, and because I could just because it was 2 or 3 costs, I could just sit there on 7 and just hit D. Because I'm rolling for both things at once. It made it very easy to just get a lot of value out of that. I think it might have been a Mumu. I think a Mumu was actually the unit that was the 3rd one, and so I just rerolled all 3 of them. But I don't think I hit a Mumu. That was the game where a Mumu 1 just did not die through stage 4 because it was like Wux as a connecting piece. Um, but yeah, so there's like a lot of little ways you can do that, and a lot of uh, cool things with Exalted when it is in the free cost pool. Like you only ever really reroll with it if it is like a bunch of free costs, generally speaking. Um, I think you'd
Yeah.
regularly do that. If it, sorry, it was a Loon Amumu Kaisa, not the not the Zoe, but she just happened to be there because she fit well. So, and I was hitting Zoe's, which is kind of, I guess, a critical part of Exalted is that you reroll it or you play it if you're hitting it, and if it's natural and, fits your board, and you have items. Like if I have a bunch of AD items and a bunch of AP items, and I don't know what to play, but there's like an AP unit in Exalted and an AD unit in Exalted, it's a pretty good trade, right? I mean, 10% damage amp. I think is it 12% on 8 now, actually, after the buff today? Um,
I don't
I
remember.
think it's 11% on 7, 12% on 8 now. I mean, they're almost might be higher than that even, but getting lower than that as well. I'm pretty sure it's 11 and 12 on 7 and 8, which is a pretty big synergy either way, though, right? It's pretty good value. Um, so yeah, it's a really cool trait, and it's something that rewards you a lot for. Like I said last time, like I'm not going out of my way to play it too much right now. It's something that will kind of come naturally. I think the more you explore units in the set, and the more you get more familiar with like how good a Zoe is in a vacuum and how good a Loon is in a vacuum, like what they need to succeed. But certainly something that can be very rewarding, and again, something that I think will certainly play a big part in people player diffing, in this set. So